can be at 3:30 and 7:30. I could do a word system. Hello everybody, I'm slightly whispering because I'm worried I'm going to start coughing. So, is everybody okay for hearing? Great. Welcome. What an exceptional turnout, Victoria. Amazing to have you all here on what started out as a rainy day. Thank you for your presence. I'd like to get Gillian King up here just to do an acknowledgement of the country for us. Thank you, Gillian.
Hello everybody and welcome. We're acknowledging that this meeting today is happening on the traditional lands of the Darramurragal and Guringai people. They lived here for tens of thousands of years, and this building is right on the Pacific Highway, which is one of their main thoroughfares. This land was never ceded. They lived here and lived their family lives and their cultural lives, where today we are continuing our family lives and our cultural lives. So we wish to pay our respects to the elders and the people who have lived here for so long. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Gillian. Tiny bit of housekeeping. Lou's just outside that way and right, or outside you can go right and then left up the stairs. And we'll be having afternoon tea in about 45 to 60 minutes. The sun is glaring in. Thank you for taking care of people. Good. All right. This is quite a big day for Voices of Bradfield. When we bring back to you the people who filled in our survey, the results, and we're all pretty excited, the Voices of Bradfield crew, to be here with you today. So thank you for making this a great turnout. What do the voters of Bradfield want? Let me give you a quick timeline. So April 28th, literally a year and 2 days ago, 6 of us started Voices. It's been a big year. September 20th, Kathy McGowan launched our candidate search. Welcome. Thanks, Jono. How many of you were there when we launched the candidate search? Yeah. Brilliant. That was an example. You switched me off. No? Are we good? You can still hear me? Great. January 8th, unanimous vote by VOB members to select Nicolette as our candidate. And January 30th, the launch of Nick's campaign. I mean, it's just the mind boggles what she and the team have done between then and now. So thank you. Yes, So, the purpose of the survey, to come to what we're discussing today, the survey was designed to be relatively brief, 8 to 10 minutes, but still comprehensive enough to allow residents of Bradfield to express their views and concerns regarding the current direction of Australian politics. It employed a series of open and closed-ended questions focused on topics identified as important issues, mainly by our early conversations and kitchen table conversations. Now, Gillian King is a great social science researcher, and between herself and myself and input from the team, we created the survey ourselves. What you see today, however, has been purely done by an amazing man who's very sorry he can't be here, Tom Gates. He's an extraordinary statistician, and he, to the highest degree of accuracy, has pulled this data together. He had to go to a wedding that's been put off 5 times, so he could not be here. But anyway, we're honouring Tom. Thank you. I've drawn on some quotes either from people that I admire, such as Margaret Wegley, or people who said these things in the survey, in the qualitative sections of the survey. And this stood out for me as what are we doing here together? I believe we can change the world if we start listening to one another again. Simple, honest, human conversation. And really that's the model that we're seeing rolling out across Bradfield and further afield. It's that listening. In terms of who we targeted the survey at, it was obviously residents of Bradfield, ideally those who could vote. The sampling method is, this is for Tom, opt-in online convenience sample. which we shared around by a variety of means, including our newsletter, word of mouth at socials, 2 websites. We had our website and one that I set up called the Listening Project, and so that's how people were able to opt in. We ran it from July 7 to January 31st, the day after we announced it. We've got enough data, we've got to focus on something else now, and it's taken us that time to sort of pull it all together and look at it. That's where it came through, those places. So, in terms of the representativeness of the survey, we had 957 respondents. Once we cleaned up the data, the final, taking people, we offered it to per hour to help them with their voices of, and there were some multiple answers from the same computer and that sort of thing. So once we cleaned up the data, we were at 618 in the final sample size. The age was fairly representative across 2 of the categories. In terms of our survey reflecting the ages of people in Bradfield, 35 to 54 and 55 to 64. We were slightly overcooked on older people, 65 plus, and slightly undercooked on younger people. But it was an unfunded survey, but it still gives us a good feel for what's going on. In terms of gender, we were on the money. And education, again, because we missed out the young people, we had more people who had university degrees, and Bradfield is a highly educated electorate, as it is, so more people with a higher end of education. Male, female was pretty spot on. And the voting history was very close to matching the electorate for Labour and Greens voters, somewhat underrepresented by Liberal voters. And I guess that we were trying our best to get a spread across the entire electorate and the entire political spectrum, but you get what you get at the end of the day. The qualitative answers from those Liberal voters were very, very compelling and interesting. Yeah. So residents' top concerns, I have to get in the classes now. Inadequate climate policy, 77%, including majority, over 50% of the Liberal voters, that was their top concern, number 1 right there. And then lack of integrity, 44% came up second across the entire spectrum. Poor management of the COVID pandemic, which we sort of interpreted as poor leadership and poor management generally. We're hearing a lot about superior economic management. Okay, maybe not. That was a concern. And then inequality in society was the 4th one that came up. Now, more than 88% of respondents desired stronger action on those issues. More progress on advocating for an Indigenous voice parliament. People are nodding, yeah. Restoring university funding. It beggars belief, we are so well educated in Bradfield. And to watch the money just piling out of the university sector, it makes no sense. With the COVID payments, there were none. Yeah, interesting disconnect between who we are and what's going on. And recognising the importance of the arts industry, again, with our incumbent being responsible for the arts industry and watching, it was already in serious trouble before COVID, and it's just got worse and worse. So more than 79% of respondents felt their views were not being listened to by the incumbent Liberal MP across a broad range of issues. So that, again, is why we're here. And this woman I spoke to in May said this, which reflects that not being listened to. It's such a safe seat, there's no point voting. The Liberals will always win by a mile, so why bother even trying for change? And that's where we're at. It's so safe. There's no listening going on, which is why we're here listening and speaking and being this feedback loop for Nicolette. So 89% of respondents were seriously concerned about pork barrelling, including 71% of the Liberal voters. Now, it's just such a funny term, pork barrelling, and in conversations in the street, most of us are out there talking to people, and it does come up. And I thought I really would like to give you a place to go where you can get an absolute doozy of a summary of the pork barrelling that's going on. So I made this little QR code. And this guy has beautifully summarised all of the pork barrelling that that's been going on. So if you want to, jump to that QR code, and I can send it out in the newsletter too. It's a summary that beggars belief as to where money's going and for what purpose. And sometimes I think we can barely take it in, the amount of money that is going to places where it really shouldn't be going. And that's why we're so big on having a federal act. That's why we need to really clean up the entire system. It's just not, it's not a game longer. And that's what the survey's telling us. Now, in terms of a couple of things that were of interest by gender, there were major differences. Interestingly, integrity was identified as a main concern by more men, 51% to 37%. And then inequality, human rights, treatment of refugees concern more women than men. So they were the main differences by gender. Of interest by age, a high proportion of all ages were concerned by the lack of climate policy. So that was across the board. Whereas integrity concerned older rather than younger respondents, 49% of over 55s, as opposed to only 35% under 55s. And housing affordability, naturally, you would assume that would be more concerning, or on people's radar if they're younger, because they're looking at the housing ladder and going, no way, how can we do this? And just this quote, a guy, I don't know if people know him, people from the team, but David, let's say, I voted Liberal my whole life, but my party's moved to the right and they no longer reflect my values. So that's what probably many of you are hearing in the streets and talking to family and friends, that shift that's happened. Women's rights and safety need to be better funded and prioritised. 92% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed. Liberal voters, 80% was slightly less likely to respond in support of this statement compared to other voters. But basically, women would pretty strongly agree rather than agree, which, makes sense. Similar responses across age and education. So we understand that we need a cultural change in Canberra, and we need a cultural change in the country. And we've got a panel coming up soon. It's in the throes of being organised, which will address this very thing: women, respect, integrity. And we've got some wonderful speakers lined up for that, so we'll get that out to you shortly. We kind of found this slightly funny. The ability to name the incumbent federal member was lowest amongst Liberal voters. Now, the criteria that informed the Voices of Candidate search, we were looking for a high level of professional experience in climate policy and renewables. A strong moral compass to address the multiple forms of inequality that we're seeing, and the inequity the gap becoming larger and larger more and more quickly. And I think a lot of us, my husband's American, we look across there and go, please, not us. We just don't want to go to that degree of housing knockouts and division and polarisation and just sheer nastiness in politics, let alone in society. So, strong moral compass, a commitment to public funding of education and restoration of the arts sector, amongst other things. I want to say a little bit about the process. So Rob and Carolyn were the two who really led that search process. It was very rigorous, and it was let's put it this way. At the start, we were worried. We had no idea who would step forward and how we would find the right person or people. And we had a number of really good candidates step forward. And when Rob and Carolyn put them through their paces and did background checks and all that sort of stuff that you need to do, Nick was just head and shoulders. She was just the one for us. And I actually was talking to, did I put it on this slide? I was talking to somebody in the team yesterday. She goes, I cried the night Voices announced Nicolette. I cried. Yeah, Nicolette Boele, thank you for being here in Bradfield with your entire life experience coming together to fulfill this role and to give it your best shot for May 21. And I would love to bring you up here now and just hear from you on some of these issues.
Thank you to Dr. Sam Graham, who made data fun. I didn't find anything particularly surprising in that. One of the things that I think after reading the 41 pages, that care for the arts and for an Indigenous voice was something that women were more interested and felt strongly about than men. But otherwise, yes. What I wanted to do, though, if you wouldn't mind, Sam, is to talk a little bit about what's happened in the last 92 days since I announced, and whether the last 3 months, from what I've heard on the streets, what I've heard in policy Zoom sessions, both from the experts and from people sending in questions and providing their feedback, questions that have come to us and feedback via the website, contact, on socials, both organic and comments against our paid social media, all these different ways that, even street meets, wine and cheese events in people's kitchens, the things that I've heard, and where I think maybe there's been a little bit of a shift. What was really interesting in the last week of the first week of February, which is a week after Voices of Bradfield launched me off, I remember Gillian King pushing the ship out into the ocean towards their heads. At that time, Parliament was sitting for one of the last times, and it was debating the religious discrimination bill. And there were some pretty unhappy people in the electorate at that time. And I think what I was hearing around then was this kind of jump up about the importance of integrity, which really came in once the election was just when we knew that the sitting had finished the week after and the pork barrel had started. We found out some $55.7 billion in less than 4 years has been spent of our money to grants programs for which there are questionable criteria that aren't necessarily made public. And that, I don't know if you put your hands up, volunteers, if you say, do you want a federal ICAC? There are not many people that say no. That's something that people connect on irrespective of age, of ethnicity, of suburb, and of you get voting attention. So just wanting better leadership, better behaviours, less mudslinging and more contest of ideas, policy debate that's uncensored and in the national interest. These are things that we deserve. So I would say that has risen probably in higher regard from what I've heard. And I'd probably say since the budget, and maybe since a little bit since interest rates rise discussion from the RBA, that economic management and certainly national security since the Bungle and Solomon's has definitely people asking questions about that. But of course, on my very strong platform on climate, there is broader things, of course, to national security than diplomacy, although that's a very important and serious one. But I, have to say it again and again. Today I did fill up my car at $1.89.7. Sorry, Jonathan. I know it was $90. And it beggars belief that in 2022, that I'm spending that much money filling up my car, when it should be $46 of solar power in my electric car. So national security, importing oil is just, it's not good. I did actually make some notes, which I've completely ignored. What I wanted to say though, if it's okay, before we have a debate and a discussion and questions, is I wanted to just stress that Voices of Bradfield essentially took the paints, the brush and the canvas, and did this hard work to listen to and find out the issues of importance to the people of Bradfield. I was just a step in that process. So in 2022, I know I'm a strong candidate, but in 10 years from now, that might need to be somebody else who's, and this electorate is rapidly changing. And I think a vibrant democracy is courageous in selecting its leaders of the time that can best represent the people of that electorate. I know in 2022 I'm pretty good. I also know that I have some good listening skills. And I realise I love it. I am learning so much more every day. So what I want to say is that once I'm elected, this process that's in place, that Voices of Bradfield's started, that I'm part of, I'm so delighted is going to continue to serve us as a community in the 47th Parliament and to channel the ideas, the views, the experience from the people in Bradfield through more kitchen tables, discussions, through surveys, through the Bradfield issues groups, through online surveys, through all sorts of other mechanisms where we're going to do some real citizen juries and engagement. So thank you very much for setting up the process, and it gives me the comfort that I'm not alone, and together we've got this. Yeah?
We'd like to take some questions, but do you have more to say?
Loads more. Nobody wants to hear me.
A lot of people.
Oh, no, yes, actually, one more thing. Yeah, it's about process. So I just want to, I just talked about the listening part, but I wanted to also give a shout out to, as a bit of a self-declared governance nerd, if you like, I've been working in sustainable finance and clean energy and trying to bring integrity and accountability to different sectors through my sustainability advice and assurance work, particularly my brother at Banara, that what made it ultimately possible to jump 2 feet in was the following. One, I had met Sam for a week once in the 1990s and done a course with her and rated her pretty highly, so that was helpful. Secondly, as we've just discussed, the issues that were of concern to Bradfield were things that concerned me and for which I had, lo and behold, spent my entire career amassing experience to step up and do it. I think about it now, it's very obvious. At the time it was like, oh. And I have worked in Parliament, so I do know what it's like when I get there. And thankfully to Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins, who gave me an injection of courage, I'm ready to go back and do it better. Definitely. Thank you, Gail. The third element that was absolutely the deal breaker for me, that got me running down the hill after meeting Paul Fletcher in the street and putting in my expression of interest, was the fact that Voices of Bradfield had in its objects, in its association, its incorporated document thingy, that technical thing, its intention, its purpose. It had values. Honesty, respect. I kind of went tick tick and went all kind of to one of them.
Would you like me to read it?
Go on.
Okay. I didn't hand these out because of that, I didn't want you to rattle these around, but they're all up here for you when at the end. But you're absolutely right. We were one of the few who included that we were going to be looking for a candidate. A lot of the Voices of groups were just going to be bipartisan and do kitchen table conversations. But we decided, no, we know we're after something more. So we formally established April 21, objective of supporting a candidate for the Federal House of Representatives in the electorate of Bradfield who is not a member of the Australian Labor Party, the Liberal Party, the Greens, or any other federally constituted political party, accepts the reality and science of climate change and recognises the need for urgent action, believes in the values of democracy, transparency, diversity and integrity, and will represent Bradfield with honesty, courage and respect for all.
Those were the things that had been clearly and intentionally articulated in the Voices of Bradfield Association's papers, and I liked that. I can hold myself to account for those things, and I can behave. I know what's expected of me to those behaviours as well. So it was the quality of the governance around that gave me the courage to jump 2 feet in until I met all the rest of the executive.
I'd like to call out Rob Mills. I don't know, I just feel like Rob was such a big part of setting that up so well. And maybe the others were, Gillian, Stuart, Carolyn, Kate, etc. I don't know, but when I think of that side of it, I think of Rob. So thank you, Rob Mills. Can we give Rob a hand? I'm absolutely stoked, I think we all are, just with the number of people in the room. We're going to open up for some questions in a minute. I'm slightly curious, how many of you already knew Nick today? Hands up if you already, like you're volunteering and you met her in the flesh. Two of those, hands up. Well, okay, so we've got quite a few new people. Hands down. Thank you so much for being here. It's really wonderful to have you along. And do you have questions, any of you, for Nick? Yes.
I was just wondering, I've been following the rise of the independents pretty closely, and thank you for standing up on these issues. It's very encouraging. But I'm just kind of interested in some of the alignments with other independents. So there's 2 particular aspects. One is, I noticed, for instance, the 2 candidates like Zoe Zebra was sort of cooperating with, I think it's the Retail candidate today, or something on. And I noticed that you're not like a teal colour as such, in terms of marketing. And the other thing is that there was another independent who's got also some very good climate policies, and I wonder how you're talking to her in terms of referencing votes or working together, or there's concerns about splitting the vote on these issues. So it's a sort of how you're aligning with these big movements.
Thank you for the question. I think there's 2 parts. One is within the electorate, and one is between other independents. Let me start at the other independents. There's not a lot of coordination. I did have dinner with Kylie Tick last night at a fundraiser with as guests for some Chinese Australian community. She rubbed shoulders for a little while. We're very busy working in our electorates, trying to win the support of people in our electorates. So not a lot of coordination. In fact, probably we should have done more if we had more time, but we haven't. I'm on a support chat group, more pastoral care, how are you treating your pneumonia, are you having your vitamin Bs and that kind of stuff with a candidate who's running as an independent in the southern part of Sydney, and one who's up against Greg Hunt in Flinders. We just found each other on a Zoom call once, thought, oh, that's quite impressive, and we connected that way. So if I had my time again, I'd probably coordinate more, and certainly when elected, I'd look more about not just the independents, the whole crossbench, irrespective of where they come from, what they stand for. I am a professional collaborator. That's what I do well. I find I'm not scared by polarised views. In fact, I'm a little bit of that's interesting, why do you think that? And I work really hard to find commonalities and get people to park their differences so we can move forward on those things. But to the question around inside the electorate, are you talking about Janine Fitzgerald? Yeah. Okay. I've only met Janine very briefly, but I have, my parents know Janine through Save Our Suburbs campaign some decades ago, and she was going for council, and when she was our councillor at Kruger. I think she's a formidable woman. She's great, she's very strong, she's got great experience, particularly with the ABC. That's an issue my husband's in the arts as well, that we're very passionate about. We haven't coordinated either. Janine was the very first person I called though when I found out that I was going to do this job, because it's still the hardest thing that I've had to do since being chosen as the Voices of Bradfield endorsed independent, because I think she's a very strong candidate. I think I met her, just on terms of having worked previously in Parliament and knowing how the processes work. When I get elected, I can hit the road running. And on the issue around climate, just got 25, 30 years on climate policy, clean energy, economy and finance, which I think is going to cut through with that level of what's needed on policy. So preferences,